I have been playing Minecraft for over 10 years at this point, and if you're anything like me, you know that sometimes the grind of just breeding cows, mining cobblestone, getting food, it can get boring and monotonous if you're not really working towards anything. So for any of you that may be looking for a new project to build, here are some of my favorite builds that I've used in my 8-year survival world. First and foremost, we have skyscrapers. These are some of my favorite builds to make, and I do them almost any time I get bored with my world, and I think it'll show with how many of them I have. In my opinion, they're one of the coolest overworld builds that you can do, and they really only take 1 to 2 double chests of material to construct. Now, I know that sounds like a lot to most of you, but compared to some of the other builds we're going to get to, that's actually kind of cheap. Now, unlike me, you may actually want to decorate and fill the insides of these buildings, but making a few of them will definitely set the tone for any city that you might want to make. In that same vein, all good cities have to have something to do, so why not make some shops? Some of my favorite shops include things like a clothing store, head shops, food stands, but may also be something as simple as like a block shop if you're playing with others in an SMP. Really, any material that you have that others could want, you can make a shop out of. And if you have any empty space between these shops, a little park is always a really easy and cool addition that I love to add to my builds. Especially when I've cleared out the area and it's really flat, it's nothing to just add a little fountain, some bushes made of leaves, and it adds a little focal point instead of just having this open area that does nothing. And now that you have some good shops in there, you're gonna need some extra security, so why not try some walls? I often find myself just being lazy and using something like normal fencing or walls to keep the mobs out, but when you add something like this, it gives a little bit more decor that can really help spruce up your builds and make it feel like a real town. While you're building these walls, you could just build it out into a full castle as well, or even just a small village. One of my favorite parts of my own world is that I'll just fly to some random spot and make a cool little getaway area out of it. Sure, it doesn't necessarily serve a purpose, but I always love flying around and finding them later on. Sticking to this village idea, why not add a windmill? Now sure, it may not actually function, but it's a pretty easy building that you can make that's really tall and can help you find where you put these villages when you inevitably lose them. Along with it, you may want to add a church nearby and make it a full-on home for some villagers. But if you're sick of sticking around the trees like a noob, why not try an underground base instead? One of the more overlooked things about building normal bases is the fact that you never have to clear any of that land out. You just sort of break blocks and go. I always find it so rewarding when I have to go underground and chisel out my own little homestead. And in these bases, you can build pretty much anything you would put in a normal base. Think like an automatic farm, maybe a chest room, and since you're underground, you could even do a wither fighting room so that you don't blow up your normal builds. If you're really feeling fancy, try and make it something that you could live in for days, maybe weeks at a time without going to the surface. And once you're a full-on hermit, you can also connect your underground base to other parts of your world using things like tunnels or a nether portal. And speaking of the nether, once you get to the other side, it's a literal hellscape, so you may want to spruce it up by adding things like a nether hub, nether highways, maybe even some mines so that you can get more netherite. I've redone mine like 3 or 4 times, and even if they don't look great, I seldom have to fight off things like gas while traveling between cities, and I'm sure you're not going to miss having to fight all of the things in the nether either. So long as you have some sort of tunnel between the different portals in your world, I think that's a win. Then once you get back to the overworld, maybe make an area to study the new nether items that you found. And it doesn't just have to be the nether, you could also add rooms to study other cool things that you may have found on your journey, like cool mobs, maybe moss, end items. The choices go on and on. Mine personally only has about 4 rooms, but I've seen people like DallasMed who have dozens. I find these builds to be particularly interesting because the lab itself can often be kind of boring, and it really forces you to find some cool stuff you probably haven't used before to make a focal point for the room. And now that you already have the moss for your lab, why not cover an entire island in it since it can grow over normal blocks? If you do it right, it can almost look like a little untamed grassy area, and you could make something like a little hobbit village like this, with a farm and a little walking trail that goes around. While you're at it, why not try making all sorts of new biomes with different blocks? On the cheaper side, you might try something like deep slate because there's a ton of it underground, and make a unique biome that might have something like quartz trees. And on this island, you could even put a little research center there fit with field sites and satellite labs that connect to your main laboratory, or maybe even another skyscraper dedicated to a very rare mob that you found on the island. If deep slate isn't your style, maybe try making an island out of dripstone and make it as rich as you can possibly afford. Gotta get that drip. And if you're really rolling in the dough, you could even try to cover an entire island out of gold and make a volcano with flowing lava over it. Now, if you're broke like I was and didn't have enough gold to cover an entire island, maybe start off with a little gold farm instead. Also, full disclosure, this is Bedrock. I cannot make a good gold farm, but for any of you Java boys, oh, this'll be nice. And of course, no gold farm would be complete without a giant golden creeper standing guard over top. It may not actually stand guard, but this is how I remember where I put the farm. And with this new gold farm, you may as well get some use out of it, so maybe try your hands at making statues. Now, they don't all have to be out of gold, but if you've seen my channel before, you know I love making golden statues. If you're new to statue building or just suck at Minecraft like I do, some of the easiest things to start off with are the Minecraft Minecraft mobs themselves because you know they're going to be blocky and they end up being really easy to copy. Me personally, I've done things like a golden cow, a golden chicken, a golden bee, an emerald sheep, a copper dog, and an amethyst axolotl. But really the options are endless and I'm not stopping here. Oh yeah, speaking of axolotls, do you have one yet? If not, go find one. They're one of my favorite mobs because they hate the drowns just as much as I do, and they're also just so adorable. But one is never enough, so why not get a few? And while you're at it, why not try and get every color of axolotl? There's leucistic, let's be honest, that's just pink. Brown, gold, cyan, and the rarest of them all, blue. Now, if you're not lucky enough to just find a blue axolotl in the wild, no worries because you can actually breed for them. So why not make a little breeding tank by a warm ocean biome so that you have easy access to the tropical fish that you'll need to get them all hubba hubba. It is a 1 in 1200 chance, so you may be there for a while, but once you found one, you'll be glad you did. And mine only took me 8 hours to get. But if you have one blue axolotl, why not breed it and make a second? At that point, why not 3? Or maybe even 1,000. Yes, side note, don't actually get 1,000. I did that and the entity cramming has made it literally unplayable within 100 blocks of that stupid tank. But you know, you could probably do 100 and be fine. Anyway, now that you have so many axolotls, let's build some cool stuff for them. One cool idea could be to go to the middle of the woods and make a cool little temple and start your own axolotl cult. Are cults not your style? Maybe just try an aquarium where the blue buddies can swim freely with their new friends. Or if you're a true capitalist, you could even make a fancy black market store for them, fit with everything they could need, like an amethyst tank and a gold ceiling. Speaking of amethyst, why not just cover an entire mountain in it? Alright, I'm not gonna lie, this one was a bad idea, but after you do something stupid like that, you can always make a villager breeder at the base, so you can have an ample number of emeralds to power all of your beacons. I've also made a froglight mountain, but I don't know that that's a good idea either, so maybe we stay away from these ones. Okay, at this point the builds are getting outlandish, so let's wrap things up with 4 of my favorite builds that I have in my world. You may have seen it earlier, but the soccer stadium in my newest city is one of my favorite builds that I have ever made, and it is just so aesthetically pleasing. All it takes is some wool to mark out a little field at the bottom, make a big circle around it, put some stairs leading down to the field, and that's about it. Now, the resources aren't going to be that cheap, but none of these ideas are. It's something you have to work towards. And for me, these stadiums are just so gorgeous, and they add a great focal point to whatever area you want to have. Because of that, I've made stadiums for soccer, baseball, football. I'm American. I'll call this what I want. A little fighting arena and a basketball court. Now, the basketball stadium is especially cool to me because I built it in the end, and for my last recommendation, I would implore you to branch out into the other realms to build. In my own end, I converted one of the islands into its own little city fit with skyscrapers and a little farm. I covered a different one in calcite, and I even made a cool little space station out there, and I just love how quiet and surreal it is to be building among the stars. That being said, if you're gonna do the end, make sure you're on peaceful because the Enderman will steal the blocks from your builds. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any other ideas that you think I may have missed, make sure to leave them down below. If you want to see something like this again, I'd love it if you left a like. And if you want to see any of the hundreds of other things that didn't make it into this video, I've actually done a full world tour of my almost 9-year survival world, and the link to that will be down below.